European School of Theosophy. The European School of Theosophy is not an organization, but a platform, not for profit, focusing on the study of theosophy and esotericism. We are continuing our 2020 conference focusing on the theme, The Mystery of Consciousness. Due to COVID-19, the conference is organized online, free of charge, every Sunday. Edward Abdill's lectures, however, will be on Wednesdays, once per month. Today we have the honor to welcome our guest speaker, Edward Abdill, who will be speaking about God, evil, and occult philosophy. Edward Abdill joined the Theosophical Society in New York in 1959 when he was 24 years old. He is the author of The Secret Gateway, Modern Theosophy and the Ancient Wisdom Tradition, and Masters of Wisdom, the Mahatmas, their letters, and the path. He will soon publish A Journey to the Real, Memoirs of a Theosophist. Edward is past vice president of the Theosophical Society in America and past president of the New York Theosophical Society. He lectures for the Society throughout the United States and internationally. In closing this introduction, I want to welcome you once more and say thank you for being here with us today. The way the meeting will commence is that we will mute your microphones and spotlight the speaker's video. At the end of the lecture, you may ask questions by raising your hand using the participants option, or by vocally asking us to give you the word, or by writing your question on the chat. Ed, thank you for being with us. The word is now yours.
Oh, we need to share our screen.
Yes, just a minute, please. I will have to make you a co-host. Make co-host. Okay, now you can share your screen, please. I'd suggest you not to use full screen, please, because we cannot see you very well.
Okay.
You can share again.
Start?
Yes. Yeah, that's better, I think. Yeah.
All right. Everyone can hear?
Oop. Yes.
Yeah? Okay. According to K.H. in the Mahatma letters, Sinnett was a veritable question mark when it came to pushing for occult information. In response to his over-enthusiastic requests, K.H. told him, "The occult science is not one in which secrets can be communicated of a sudden by a written or even verbal communication. If so, all the brothers would have to do would be to publish a handbook of the art, which might be taught in schools, as grammar is. It is the common mistake of people that we willingly wrap ourselves and our powers in mystery, that we wish to keep our knowledge to ourselves, and of our own will refuse wantonly and deliberately to communicate it. The truth is that till the neophyte attains to the condition necessary for that degree of illumination, to which and for which he is entitled and fitted, most, if not all, the secrets are incommunicable. The receptivity must be equal to the desire to instruct. The illumination must come from within. Till then, no hocus-pocus of incantations or mummery of appliances, no metaphysical lectures or discussions, no self-imposed penance can give it. All these are but means to an end, and all we can do is to direct the use of such means as have been empirically found by experience of ages to conduce to the required object. And this was and has been no secret for thousands of years. Fasting, meditation, chastity of thought, word, and deed, silence for certain periods of time to enable nature to herself to speak to him who comes to her for information, government of the animal passions and impulses, utter unselfishness of intention, the use of certain incense and fumigations for physiological purposes have been published as the means since the days of Plato and Iamblichus in the West, and since the far earlier times of our Indian rishis. So he set it right on that. HPB writes, the secret doctrine teaches no atheism, except in the Hindu sense of the word nastika, or the rejection of idols, including every anthropomorphic god. In this sense, every occultist is a nastika. It admits a logos, or collective creator of the universe, a demiurgos, in the sense implied when one speaks of an architect as the creator of an edifice, whereas the architect has never touched one stone of it, but while furnishing the plan, left all the manual labor to the masons. In our case, the plan was furnished by the ideation of the universe, and the constructive labor was left to the hosts of intelligent powers and forces. But that demiurgos is no personal deity. That is an imperfect extra-cosmic god, but only the aggregate of the Dhyan Chohans and the other forces. Now, K.H. claims that the Jesus of the New Testament is a spiritual abstraction rather than a living man of that epoch. He differentiates between the Christ and the man Jesus by saying that the former is the sixth principle of the human being, buddhi. He claims that the human Jesus was an adept more by his inherent purity and ignorance of real evil than by what he had learned from his initiated rabbis and the already fast degenerating Egyptian hierophants and priests. According to K.H., it was not only Jesus who was an adept, but Paul, St. Paul, who calls the Christian adept, the Kabbalistic Paul, who said, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you?" You will find in the New Testament the letters of Paul have most certainly the most theosophical statements in the Christian Bible. Now, there can be no doubt that the Adepts reject the idea of any extra-cosmic God, including the one portrayed by exoteric Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They do not deny that there are great truths in the Scriptures. Occasionally, they even quote a passage from the Bible that they believe illustrates a point they are trying to make. However, they reject a literal interpretation of everything in the Bible, and they do not believe every word of it is divinely inspired. As to the idea of an individual spirit and personal God, K.H. writes, "Neither our philosophy nor ourselves believe in a God, least of all one whose pronoun necessitates a capital H." He goes on to state, "The idea of God is not an innate but an acquired notion. The God of the theologians is simply an imaginary power, a power which has never yet manifested itself. Our chief aim is to deliver humanity of this nightmare, to teach man virtue for its own sake, and to walk in life relying on himself instead of leaning on a theological crutch that for countless ages was the direct cause of nearly all human misery. Pantheistic we may be called, agnostic never." K.H. then says that if people want to call our one life God, then they may do so, but it will be a gigantic misnomer. I might add here that Helen Keller, when she was told about God, said she always knew him but didn't know his name. In other words, she had a sense of the spiritual, and then she found that the Christians and Jews and Muslims call that experience God. Now, K.H. calls the idea of a personal God a nightmare because a nightmare is imaginary. It exists only in the mind of the one experiencing the nightmare, and it is a frightening experience. God is to be feared, say those who believe in the God portrayed in the Bible, and for centuries, many have been terrified of God's potential wrath against them. Fortunately, this seems less so in recent years, but there are still those who are afraid that they will be sent to an eternal hell of punishment for what sometimes seems to be only minor infractions. Even though mainstream Christianity has a somewhat less anthropomorphic view of God today, the Church still teaches that the God of the Bible is omniscient, omnipotent, and full of love. K.H. challenges that view by asking Sinnett how he can believe such a doctrine when everything in nature, physical and moral, proves such a being, if he does exist, to be quite the reverse of all you say of him. He adds, strange delusion, and one which seems to overpower your very intellect. Despite their rejection of an extra-cosmic personal deity, the Adepts are intellectually honest. K.H. writes, "You were told that our knowledge was limited to this, our solar system. Ergo, as philosophers who desired to remain worthy of the name, we could not either deny or affirm the existence of what you termed a supreme, omnipotent, intelligent being of some sort beyond the limits of that solar system. But if such an existence is not absolutely impossible, yet, unless the uniformity of nature's law breaks at those limits, we maintain that it is highly improbable. Nevertheless, the masters know that the God of the Bible says can the Bible says can be angry, jealous, and even vindictive. He does not exist in our solar system." I always love what Voltaire said. God made man in his own image, and man has been repaying the compliment ever since. In 1705, Samuel Clarke published a demonstration of the being and attributes of God, end quote. K.H. was obviously aware of Clarke's so-called proofs of God existence and commented on the following proof to Sinnett. This is what Clarke wrote: "God, who hath made the eye, shall he not see? God, who hath made the ear, shall he not hear?" And K.H. goes on to say, "But according to this mode of reasoning, they would have to admit that in creating an idiot, God is an idiot. That he who made so many irrational beings, so many physical and moral monsters, must be an irrational being." So he disproved that by using Clarke's own logic. Although the Adepts deny every imaginable anthropomorphic God, the Adepts acknowledge that there may be a conscious and voluntary or self-determining conscious of the universe. K.H. writes, "Did it ever strike you that the universe, like finite human mind, might have two attributes or a dual power? One, the voluntary and conscious, and the other, the involuntary and unconscious or the mechanical power. To reconcile the difficulty of many theistic and anti-theistic propositions, both these powers are a philosophical necessity. The possibility of the first, or the voluntary and conscious attribute, will remain ever a mere hypothesis, whereas in the finite mind, It is a scientific and demonstrated fact. The highest planetary spirit is as ignorant of the first as we are, and the hypothesis will remain one even in nirvana, as it is mere inferential possibility, whether there or here. I don't think many of us has ever considered that possibility, but it rings true to me. It certainly rings as a very definite possibility. Now, evil. Why is there evil? That's the greatest question for any philosophy. In her collected writings, Blavatsky tells us that, quote, the problem of the origin of evil can be philosophically approached only if the archaic Indian formula is taken as the basis of the argument. Ancient wisdom alone solves the presence of the universal fiend in a satisfactory way. It attributes the birth of cosmos and the evolution of life to the breaking asunder of primordial manifested unity into plurality, or the great illusion of form. Homogeneity having transformed itself into heterogeneity, contrasts have naturally been created, hence sprang what we call evil, end quote. So the Eternal One has polarized, and of necessity, that polarization produces the opposites. We can think of nothing that cannot be contrasted with its opposite, or at least with something other than itself. Without that contrast, words would have no meaning. Whatever object or idea that we can imagine has its other. This is true even of such words as and, A-N-D, because there is not and. We can go on with male, female, mountain, valley, wet, dry, true, false. Soon we would discover that the examples are endless. The greatest and most difficult of the opposites to understand is that of good and evil. Yet without evil we could not understand what good is. This simple fact does not sit well with us. It leaves us unsatisfied because we can find no use for evil. Yet evil may have its use. Often people come out of tragedy stronger, more compassionate, even more patient than before. There is an expression in Spanish that sums it up in a few words. No hay mal que por bien no venga. It translates, there is no evil from which a good does not come. I think that's at least 90% true. St. Augustine was intrigued with the question of evil. Even though he connected it with original sin, he was the origin of that idea, by the way. He had a very strong sexual desire, couldn't explain it, so invented original sin. That solved it for him. He saw that it might have a place in the great scheme of things. In his exposition on the Psalms, he wrote that evil people serve some purpose. He said that every wicked person may be converted, and even if they are not converted, they exist to try and test the righteous. He added that we should not hate evil people, because we cannot know if they will persist in their evil ways to the end. Then he issued a warning to the righteous. He said we should not hate evildoers, because often when we think we are hating an enemy, we are hating our brother without knowing it. Annie Besant, the second international president of the Theosophical Society, commented that everything grows by struggling against that which opposes. We can easily understand that our muscles would never develop if we did not use them against the force of gravity. Were we to sit stationary in a chair for a month, we would be unable to get up from the chair. We can also see that our mind would not develop were we to spend our entire lives without any mental challenges. It is by using our mind to solve problems that our mind develops. What most of us fail to realize is that the difficult people in our lives provide an opportunity for us to grow psychologically. Unless we can walk away from difficult people, we must develop ways to deal with them. For example, if we are not independently wealthy and we are having a difficult time with our boss, we cannot simply quit the job, especially if jobs are scarce. Perhaps we have been too weak. Perhaps we have allowed the boss to trample on our rights as a fellow worker. The emotional pressure may force us to try to work out our difficulties with the boss. The evil of the bad relationship may result in the good of making us stronger, even a happier person. Many who believe in a personal God are convinced that Satan exists, that he is the source of evil in the world. Others who do not believe in such a spirit yet believe that evil is an independent power in the world. The masters reject those ideas. They claim that evil, per se, does not exist. It is not an imaginary power, any more than good is an independent power. Nature is destitute of good or evil, just as electricity is neither good nor bad. It all depends on how human beings use it. It can light our homes, or it can be used to torture a victim. The Master says that the origin of evil is in reasoning man, that is humanity. Humanity, not nature, is the source of evil. K.H. asks Sinnett to trace any evil to its source, and he will find that it originates in human selfishness and greed. K.H. reasons that evil is the exaggeration of good. He points out that food, sexual relations, drink are all natural necessities of life, yet excess in them brings on disease, misery, suffering, mental and physical, and the latter are transmitted as the greatest evils to future generations, the progeny of the culprits. Food, wealth, ambition, and 1,000 other things become the source and cause of evil, whether in its abundance or through its absence. Therefore, neither nature nor an imaginary deity has to be blamed, but human nature made vile by selfishness. K.H. then asks Sinnett to think over what he said, and he will have solved a third of the problem of evil. Now, we mustn't take those fractions to be literal. K.H. next identified what he calls 2/3 of the problems of evil. What he says has upset many and caused some to reject everything the Adepts teach. But if one suspends judgment and tries to understand the heart of what is being said, the cold, hard truth of it may become clear. K.H. wrote that 2/3 of the world's evil has been caused by religion, under whatever form and in whatsoever nation. Ignorance created gods, and cunning took advantage of the opportunity. Look at India, and look at Christendom and Islam, at Judaism and fetishism. It is priestly imposture that rendered these gods so terrible to man. It is religion that makes of him a selfish bigot, the fanatic that hates all mankind out of his own sect, without rendering him any the better or more moral for it. It is belief in God and gods that makes 2/3 of humanity the slaves of a handful of those who deceive them under the false pretense of saving them. Is not man ready to commit any kind of evil if told that his God or gods demand the crime? We can see this today everywhere. The destruction of the trade towers in New York, all from an alleged religious belief, when it really was just a demented group of people who thought they were serving God. Since those words were written in the 1880s, mainstream Christianity, and no doubt other religions, have come a long way. Interfaith cooperation has been growing, and prominent leaders of all religions can be found who denounce intolerance and encourage interreligious cooperation. From Roman Catholic popes to the Dalai Lama, there has been a major effort to encourage respect for all major faiths. And often there are religious services. Still among us, of course.
I get this on this computer. I can hear the sound and I can see the things.
What was that? Didn't get that.
Did someone ask a question?
No, I'm sorry. Someone had a mic problem.
Okay, we'll continue.
My
Please
apologies.
go on.
My apologies.
Almost finished here. Anyway, still among us, of course, are the bigots who denounce all outside of their faith and from their proud and insular perch condemn all to hell but themselves. Although K.H. tells us that 1/3 of the world's evils come from selfishness and 2/3 from religion, we must not take those fractions literally. In fact, if we look at what K.H. says about evil caused by religion, we will see that it is rooted in selfishness and greed, especially as it manifests in a desire for power and a desire to control others. K.H. agrees with the Buddha, who taught, "From ignorance springs all the evils. From knowledge comes the cessation of this mass of misery." It is ignorance of our true nature, ignorance of our roots in an eternal one, that causes us to act selfishly, as though we were a law unto ourselves alone. Thank you. Questions and comments?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ed. That was such a short lecture. We want more. So could you please unshare your screen?
Do what?
Unshare. Yes, thank you. We are opening for questions now.
When we originally gave this presentation, Ed started with a brainstorm of about 5 questions.
Really? Yes, there is silence.
What were they?
There were questions such as, what do you think evil is? What do you think heaven is? What do you think hell is?
Yeah.
Why do you think there is evil?
Well, we just went through all that.
I know, but it's interesting what people think those things are in their own minds, as opposed to what they might think academically.
Yes.
Sorry, I interrupted you. This is Paul. I'm the president of the Leeds Theosophical Society in the UK. And I came late because I've been experiencing computer problems. So I had to swap onto another computer so I can see and hear everything now. So I missed more or less everything. So perhaps you can repeat it from the beginning, please.
He said he had computer problems, so he didn't hear you. So can you repeat it from the beginning? Thank you.
I think it's recorded. You can hear it in the recording. Erica will send the link out, I'm sure.
But good news.
Can I take it that I don't know. I got bits of it. Are you saying that evil? The masters are saying evil doesn't exist or good doesn't exist. I'm not. Can you perhaps just summarise that point? Not from the beginning, but just that point.
The point of does evil exist?
The point that the masters say, does evil exist? Does good exist? That they don't exist. Yeah. So just summarize.
Yeah, the thing is, as they pointed out, now nature is not evil. Nature is destructive. Tornadoes do terrible damage, floods, earthquakes, all that kill people and cause terrible damage. But that's not evil. Nature, as he said, is destitute of good or evil. It's just following nature's laws. So we can't call nature evil. And he said, as you may have heard, that every human evil can be traced to selfishness and greed. And I would defy anyone to find any other cause. You can trace every evil back, political, religious, personal, whatever. You'll find that the root of it is personal greed and selfishness. So the adept is saying there isn't any such thing as an independent power of evil, like electricity is an independent power. No such thing, he says, as good or evil. It depends on what humans do with the powers of nature that make it good or evil. It has nothing to do with nature itself or any of the powers of nature. It has only to do with the way humans employ those powers. And if they do it selfishly, it's called evil, and if they do it altruistically, it's called good.
Thank you.
Any other question? Oh, there is silence. So I have a question. So the nature of evil, according to the Mahatmas, is selfishness.
So,
Yes, it's selfishness and greed. As he said, if you trace any human evil back, you will find that's the root of it. Take, without naming any political parties or anything, take politicians. They're so concerned about getting themselves in power that they will do almost anything, tell lies, they will twist the truth, anything to get power. That is greed and selfishness, isn't it? So you take anything, you take whatever you want, anything at all, and you'll find the root of it is in human selfishness and greed.
Thank you.
Can a politician be spiritually advanced?
please repeat.
Can a politician be spiritually advanced?
Can a politician be spiritually advanced?
Of course they could. Haven't met any, but they could. I think there are some politicians who are really, basically very good. Our Jimmy Carter, for example, who is still living, whether one agreed with his politics or not, he is truly a good man. In his 90s, he's still building homes for the homeless. He's still contributing to the world. He may have made lots of mistakes in his life, like all of us. He may have been on the opposite side of some political views, but I think essentially he is a good man, and he was a politician, of course.
I was thinking of someone like Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln, yes, also. And of course, many European and Asian politicians as well. We can't limit it to the United States, which is only a small part of the world.
Thank you, Ed, for the comment. Dino, you have to unmute yourself, please.
Unmute? Must I unmute?
Yes, unmute yourself, Dino.
That's it.
Yes, there you are.
No.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Dino. Can you?
I have a question.
Yes.
You are talking about selfishness and greed. Can that be the effect of the power of people to survive? Is it an effect of surviving initially?
I repeat the questions because he has difficulty hearing. So is power and greed the result of the need for survival?
Oh, for self-preservation.
Yes.
Yeah. I suppose it can be, but you see, that is still selfish. It's still me.
Sure,
If
sure.
wants to survive. Me will do anything to survive.
Yeah.
The great heroes of the human race have sacrificed themselves, haven't they? There have been soldiers who've thrown themselves on a grenade to save their fellow soldiers.
Sure.
There have been mothers who have sacrificed their lives for their children.
Sure.
So that happens, and that is, we call that good. But the survival instinct is in nature, throughout nature, from even plants. Plants,
Yeah.
animals, and humans have that strong survival nature.
Yeah.
But only humans seem to be able, very seldom, but still be able to forego that, to
Yeah.
drop it for the sake of others. So,
Sure.
so it can definitely come from this desire to survive, but when that is overpowering the good of others, it becomes selfish.
Sure.
Dino, you have the word,
Yeah.
please.
Thank you, Edward. Can you hear me?
Now we
Now
can.
we can't, though.
Thank you, Edward, for your wonderful lecture. How long will it take for humanity to understand what you said tonight? Not only that, not only that, it has been said that humanity, if there is no God, they create one God. If you look back when Moses went up to the Mount Sinai and he came down and the people built the golden calf, you know. So it seems that human beings cannot do without some sort of divinity.
Can you translate that?
But there were two questions. One was how long before humanity
Yeah,
accepts
got that
what
one.
you said, and the other is when people seem to want a divinity.
Yeah. Okay, how long it will take, no one knows. But according to the occult philosophy, the human race is going through 7 major stages of development, which Sinnett stupidly called root races. It has nothing to do with race, of course. It has to do with stages of human development. We are allegedly in the 5th stage, the development of mind. According to the Adepts, every one of these stages ends in cataclysms. That is, that you can see how that could happen with the current development of mind. We get so clever, we develop so many destructive devices that we could eventually destroy ourselves, you see. We could wipe out most of the human race, never all of it, according to the Adepts. And then we will begin with a new stage of development. The next stage is allegedly intuition, in the sense of being able to, turn our attention to a problem and instantly understand the problem and get the solution to it. So no one knows how long, but the Adepts say it'll take a very long time. According to Blavatsky, each of these major stages of human development, called root races, have 7 subdivisions. We are allegedly in the 5th subdivision of the 5th root race, and therefore a double whammy on development of mind. And even in my lifetime, shortly to be 85 years old, I mean, the development is absolutely astounding. I grew up without television. You know, we listened to the radio. As one of my friends said, I was born when the car was developed. I'm dying when man is put on the moon. So we have made it huge advances in technology. However, Blavatsky says that even the sub-race that we are now in, the 5th sub-race of the 5th root race, will take 25,000 more years. So we're talking about an extraordinarily long time, an inconceivable amount of years for the human mind to grasp. What was the other question?
Why does man
Oh yeah,
create
humanity.
God?
Yeah, you see, the thing is, as K.H. pointed out, human beings, well, he didn't say this, but I'm sure he knows it and would have said it. Human beings are curious by nature, aren't we? We want to know why. Children always ask, why? And the parent finally gets sick of it and just says, because I said so. You know, I mean, it's the why. We want to know why. I wanted to know that when I was 4 years old. Why am I here? What's going on? It was a very strong thing. So what happens is, when we don't have the answers, we think, well, it must be some kind of God. And therefore, we rely on this imaginary idea that we have created, and that God is going to help us. I find it very difficult to understand how modern-day Christians think God is a God of love all the time, and they say, oh, thank God helped me, you know, God saved me from the flood. Well, he didn't save that baby next door. I mean, why did he save you? You see, who are you to be saved when the baby was drowned in the flood? You see, they don't, as KH said, look around you and you'll see that this very God you talk about is the opposite of what you say. So if there is a God, if I ever believed in a creative God, which I don't, a creator God, I would be a deist, as some of our country's founding fathers were, Franklin and Jefferson, for example. They both believed there was a creator God, but after he created the universe, he walked away and left it run on its own. Isn't that what's happening? There's no interference from a divinity, you know. People credit the divinity when something good happens, and they credit evil when something not good happens. And it's just, as KH says, it defies reason.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Ed, this is a philosophical problem, which is the problem of the evil.
This is a philosophical problem, the problem of evil.
Yes, it is. And
yes,
I think
which goes more or less like this. If God is all-powerful, he should be able to eliminate evil.
If God is all-powerful, he should be able to eliminate evil.
If God is all good, he should want to eliminate evil.
If he's so good, he should want to eliminate evil.
I know. That's
evil exists. So that's the conclusion. Evil exists. So if God is all-powerful, why evil exists? So it comes down to the notion of an anthropomorphical God, which the Mahatmas criticize in their letters, isn't it?
Yeah. There is a line, I've forgotten the exact quote. I can find it. If somebody wants to email me, I can eventually find it. It's a line in the Jewish Bible, the part of the Bible that Christians call the Old Testament. And they have God saying, I created good and I created evil. I, your God, have done all these things. Now, the fundamentalists, I mean, I don't know how they handle that one. I guess they just ignore it, you know. So, yeah, if God were omnipotent and omniscient and good, then, as you say, he would never have allowed evil to exist, you see. And so the proofs are right in front of us all the time that there cannot be such a all-good, all-knowing, all-powerful entity out there. If he's all good, if he's all powerful and omniscient, he's not all good. You see, so I mean, it's just, as KH says, it defies reason to believe this nonsense. And so anyway, I was a very devout Christian. I was so devout that I couldn't even tolerate a religious joke. I wouldn't even smile. Now I tell the most outrageous ones, you see. So because I believed in this creator God. But I realized after coming into theosophy and meditation that this tremendous spiritual power that I felt from the time I was 4 years old was not an exterior God, but was my own inner self united with all.
Thank you. And I have a question, and then there is a second question also by Carlos Navarro. I will just finalize mine, which is basically, in my personal opinion, I think the notion of God is not so problem. I think that the notion of God, it is linked to the notion of the sacred, and the notion of the sacred is not a problem. So perhaps we are the conceptual notion of God as anthropomorphical creature is the problem, not the notion of God as a divine sacred principle. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It is, to me, in meditation, one can reach, and I have reached, as thousands and thousands have reached, that state of the eternal. I mean, and that to me is sacred. It is absolutely sacred. I bow down to no external creature, but I bow down to the sacred. So that is definitely a reality. The divinity is a reality. The Adepts do not deny that. They deny a separate individual creator God out there that made everything and then sat back and looked at it, you see. So someone once said he must have a sense of humor when he created a giraffe.
Well, Carlos has a question. He's asking, but the creation had to be done by some type of God or entity. What would you comment about? But the creation has to be done by some type of God or entity.
Okay, now KH wants in answer to Sinnott's question, which must have been about the creation. We don't have Sinnott's letters, you see, we only have the responses, and we can infer what the question was by the response. KH said to Sinnott, go on thinking that man and nature were created, and you will be up against hard facts forever. But once realize that neither nature nor man was created any more than this iceberg now before me, and all will become clear. No one created the iceberg. The iceberg is a state of water in the sea, isn't it? It's a state of the one life that exists for a temporary time. So it wasn't created, and if we think about it that way, I think it'll become clear, as KH says, that it doesn't require an external being to create. It's a state of the universe. KH calls the objective universe, the manifested universe, which we call the world, he calls it the objective phase of the subjective whole.
Thank you. Carlos, this is very metaphysical, which has to do with the way that the theosophical system refers to the process of manifestation. We do not use the notion of creation, but manifestation. That's the difference. That's what Eddie was explaining.
She's saying that it was manifestation versus creation.
Yeah.
Do we have any other question? Comments?
Just the comment that it's the separation of God and man versus the not separation that seems to be the problem.
Yeah, perhaps the notion that God is a creature, also anthropomorphical, isn't it? Is also a problem. Yeah. So we have silence. I think that we can close the session today if we don't have any other questions. Thank you so much, Ed and Mary, for being here today and giving this wonderful presentation. It has been a long time since I last saw you both.
Too long.
Too long. So, Ifigenia, do you have anything that you would like to say before closing?
Do you want to summarize anything yet?
I don't think I think I've let KH summarize it pretty well. The last time we met, of course, was in Salzburg, which was the very first place I ever traveled outside of the United States. I went to a World Congress of the Theosophical Society there, and I met Clara Codd and other luminaries of the system. And then the last trip I take outside of the country was to Salzburg again. Isn't that kind of curious?
Yeah.
And when I was in Salzburg, I did not have this back problem then, but what happened was I remember being so utterly exhausted. Ingrid took Mary and me to a museum on a free day. I was so tired I couldn't put one foot in front of the other. I was utterly exhausted, and yet I had slept allegedly the whole evening, whole night. Later, when we got home a couple years ago, maybe 3 or so now, Mary told me in the morning that in the middle of the night, I stopped breathing for about 10 seconds and gasped for breath. So I went to the doctor. I was given a sleep apparatus that I put on overnight and tested. And when the data was read, I had stopped breathing 36 times an hour.
Oh, God.
That was my only symptom. I didn't know it was happening. The only symptom was exhaustion. I didn't get my sleep, you see. So I was exhausted during the day. So now I have a CPAP machine, an automatic, actually it's an APAP, automatic machine, and a mask I wear every night. And I've got those 36 times of apnea, as they call it, down to between 1 and 3 a night. So it helps enormously, and I don't feel so exhausted now. It's a pain. I went through 6 different masks before I found one that worked. The first one was so bad it made my nose bleed.
No, no.
I got one that you can't say any of them are comfortable, but at least it's acceptable. You know, it just goes over the tip of the nose and over your mouth. So
that's your summary, Ed?
His version of a mask, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Ed, about it.
because Erica asked me last time if I had that back problem in Salzburg, so I thought about that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
God and evil and all of that is just that I no longer believe in a creator God, but that power, that spiritual power, which I felt from 4 years old on, has not weakened. It has become stronger. So I am aware of this inner divinity, this eternal divinity that is within each human being. I believe it to be in each human being. I can't prove it, but I do believe it is in each human being. And so as one of my friends said, who died some years ago, he said, "By God, Ed, I hope when we die we get a debriefing." According to the literature we do, we get a review of the life with some sense of its purpose. So we can just live in hope, I guess, that is happening.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us, Ed.
And should I go on then?
Yes, please, Ify, do you have anything to say?
Yes. Thank you very much, Ed, for a marvelous presentation of the teachings of KH. And now at this point, we have come to the end of today's meeting. And on behalf of the European School of Theosophy, I wish to thank you all for participating. I also wish to remind you our meeting on the coming Sunday, October the 18th at 5 o'clock London time. Our guest speaker on Sunday will be Adepts, and he will speak about the contemporary scientific theories on consciousness. So thank you again and goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks for hosting it. Bye.
Bye. Thank
What
you.
is the Sunday one, did she say?
Who's that?
Adepts.
Adepts.
Did you get the date?
Next Sunday. It'll come up on Facebook.